Hi, it's Hayden here, and you're very welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's a podcast where each week I talk to a male guest and we discuss skincare, grooming, fragrance. We discuss their life, their work, and what they really think about the man that looks back at them in the mirror. We touch on their morning and evening routines and the products that work well for them, with the hope that maybe there's some suggestions there that you can take into your own routines. Now, my guest this week is Brendan Murdock, who is a creative. He's a designer, an entrepreneur. He founded the brand Murdock London, and now he has a brand called Anatomē, which is a wellbeing brand and is a reimagining, I suppose, of the traditional apothecary, trying to bridge the gap between health and wellness. It feels like a really interesting time for this kind of brand, and I took so much from this conversation with Brendan, and I think you will too. He's all about trying to champion health, happiness, and he has so much insight into all of that. There's also a brand new wellbeing parfum collection that Brendan tells me about during our conversation. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping. I have a tipping service at coffee.com. Again, if you haven't heard the podcast before, just to be transparent, there's no adverts, so really it's just a way of trying to recoup some of the costs of the upload to the streamers and the actual service I use to record the podcast. So my tipping service is at Coffee, and it's ko-fi.com/man in the mirror, and any donations would be really gratefully received, and they'll go towards running of the podcast. So, housekeeping out the way, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest, Brendan Murdock, a creative designer, entrepreneur, and founder of Anatomē. Here we go. Welcome along to Man in the Mirror. It's Hayden here, and as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm thrilled to say I'm joined by creative designer, entrepreneur, and founder of Anatomē London. It's Brendan Murdock. Morning, Brendan. How are you?
Good morning, Hayden. I'm really well. Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you too. And are you currently in the store by the look of your background?
I am in the store here at Marylebone, so getting ready for a day ahead.
Fantastic. And well, I think it'd be great, as always, with guests to sort of find out a little bit more about the background and how it all began. Because I know you started in the world of hospitality and bars and restaurants before you got into products and services. What was it that made you want to make the shift into making things and being a retailer, I suppose?
Yeah, I suppose the starting point was creating a restaurant and really discovering Mediterranean ingredients in this kind of big warehouse environment where we were pioneering a lot of organic, natural wines. And so there's a lot of innovation around sharing platters and discovering ingredients coming out of a wood-fired oven. Right. And at the time, Shoreditch was very much the birthplace of fads and fashions with a real energy in the early 2000s. And like anything, restaurants are tough. You have a lot of creative chefs. You have chefs that maybe sometimes find it hard to turn up to work after a lot of socializing, shall we say. And so not being a chef, a lot of things are out of your control. An evening is all about, in a restaurant, about everyone being on point, delivering really good food, delivering great service. And I realized how hard it was to maintain that. And I was also interested in this time in apothecaries, men's grooming, and there was a lot of talk around metrosexual men rediscovering skincare. And there was a little shop across the street that was on a corner unit. And I looked at it and thought, I could open a chemist. And I thought, well, I can't, that's heavily regulated. So I started with a barbershop. And in the barbershop, we started off with 2 chairs and we're using really historic artisan shaving products from around Europe mainly and incorporating that into the men's grooming rituals. And I kind of wanted to democratize the barbershop and communicate and connect with different constituencies of gentlemen. So at the time, barbershops were often quite maybe more down at heel, and then in Mayfair and St. James's, they were a little bit more elevated, but still quite conservative, stuffy. So that's really where I started into the world of cosmetics. I started to create perfumes. We started to create shaving creams and skincare. And I worked a lot with a lady called Anastasia Brosier, who's a very well-known in London couture perfumer.
Right.
And it was really, that was the starting point, maybe bringing in this kind of knowledge in food and ingredients. And I brought that into the world of Murdock and creating these, I think at the time we had 9 perfumes. And so that world of creating scent is really now mirrored in anatomē. And when you create perfume, often what happens at the end of the kind of creative process, you then synthesize ingredients with commercial fragrance houses. And a lot of the essence that's gone into the couture formula is lost. And I felt that was something to really rediscover, taking perfume back a couple of 100 years when you weren't using synthetics, that you were using a lot of essential oils and perfume ingredients to be well and to support you to be awake or to be asleep or to be more enlivened. And that was what I wanted to bring into anatomē London. And really this sense of anatomē apothecary in an odd manner brings together this grooming experience, this food experience. And what we're trying to do here is to dispense modern formulations for a contemporary customer that may be discovering the apothecary for the first time. So that's a very long answer to a very short question.
No, it's fascinating. And you've obviously been extremely modest about Murdock London, and we've touched upon it on the podcast before, but you grew it into a really successful brand. And obviously, now I suppose it seems a bit more commonplace to have, as you say, have that sort of democratic but elevated way of doing barbering and those various services. But you moved on to anatomē, and as you explained there, the idea of the traditional apothecary but modernizing it. I mean, for people that don't know the brand, it would be great if you could explain a bit about what anatomē is and what people might expect if they visit the website or come to the store in Marylebone.
I think we're really honing in as an apothecary on precious, extraordinary ingredients that have a transformative power to support your well-being. And so when you come to anatomē, for a lot of customers, they discover our sleep formulations for the first time. And we blend around 18 different individual essential oil extracts in each of these sleep formulas. Wow. So it's quite an innovative area where you're introducing structured scent out of a world called a science, not a world called aromatology.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the science of an ingredient and how does it impact the behavior, your mood. And really it's about scent engaging with the neurotransmitters in the brain, and it's helping you in our sleep formulation specifically to relax, to unwind, where your subconscious is looking for this scent. I often compare it to, say, walking into a favorite bakery in Paris or something where you feel completely at ease and relaxed.
Yeah.
And that's what the power of scent has to do with the mind. So we have these formulations around sleep. We have skincare to help nurture and relax you in the evenings. We have core health supplements that anchor the physical well-being. And then most recently, we're just in the last couple of weeks bringing in perfume. And that's really supporting you as you move around the world, around the city. So in essence, anatomē is supporting the emotional and physical part of our being, the mind and body, and helping us provide these anchors that help us perform better and live a better life, hopefully.
Brendan, we've seen you've got a physical store there in Marylebone. Do you still think having a bricks and mortar space that people can visit is important for a brand like anatomē?
Yes, I think that stores have a very important spot in the world of engaging with a brand, to experience it for the first time, to discover the scent, in many ways to meet the people behind the brand. And there's a big education piece within what we're doing. It's innovating an area that maybe didn't have so much innovation around scent. And so you obviously can't smell through a computer, and there are ways of obviously delivering scent through sampling programs.
Yeah.
But physically, we're here in Marylebone, and then we're in other stores such as Selfridges, and we're in movement spaces and gym spaces where you can potentially engage and discover scent in yoga or movement. And so I think it's being relevant, being in spaces where you spend time, from the traditional retail into more contemporary spaces. And one thing that I've innovated is bringing the brand into hotels. So we're doing turn down in some hotels with sleep oils We are an amenity provider in some luxury hotels. And we're also starting to develop a footprint into travel airlines and cruise ships. So anywhere where we can help you relax.
And I suppose some of that kind of work, it must help, well, obviously introduce people to the brand, but do you find that if people experience it in a hotel or on a plane or something like that, you know, it's an opportunity to gain a new customer, isn't it? And get people to sample the brand, yeah.
It's an opportunity to get a new customer and they engage for the first time. It's a strong brand awareness tool. So you subconsciously start to see the word anatomy in different places. So you associate it with your lifestyle and what you're doing. And then hopefully from a brand awareness perspective, if you see editorial or you hear this interview, you would then start to think, oh, I must discover that brand.
Yeah.
I think it's even tougher now to get attention to the brand name. There's so many more brands than there ever was 10 years ago. Consumers have different choices, different tribes. Who do they want to align with? So cutting through that and reaching the hearts and minds of a consumer is a challenging piece.
So it's almost like you have to do more work at the beginning to get people to understand.
Yeah, there's a lot more work. And I think sometimes we underestimate the work it takes to educate the consumer and to reach them. And you expend a lot of energy in the early stages of our brand, doing events, doing pop-ups, finding out how do I connect the customer, who is my customer. So we just started before lockdown, and for anyone interested in kind of business trajectory, and then you find yourself locked away, trading up digital. And then I think I made a couple of errors where I really overzealously thought I'll regain my customer in 2022. And I did pop-ups, and pop-ups have value because you see customers. But we were in danger of popping up too many places. And there's a lot of staff to do that. And in a way, you need to be really connected digitally to make that maximized opportunity, that you're collecting data, that you're really sophisticated in how to build up that universe of anatomy. So I think physical retail is super important. But for now, we're trying to be a lot more focused where are our customer. And we kind of understand the customer now. They're a health Epicurean. They have quite a good taste palette because they've discovered scent, they've discovered ingredients through food, how they travel. So there's always an early adopter audience. And I think the core audience is men and women, often in the older age bracket, 45 plus, who are struggling to sleep, who have the depth of income to spend. And that's your regular customer that's coming in and seeing us and discovering the brand. And then we have a younger customer who will come in at a lower level, but also equally, you know, a lot of younger people are saying, I'm stressed, I'm anxious. And I think we're all aware of people saying in the morning now, how did you sleep last night? So it's actually becoming part of a conversation that didn't exist before. But there's this huge spectrum of knowledge because you're acquiring knowledge from TikTok, from the news, from other sources. You know, you have American consumers coming in saying, do you sell melatonin? And you're like, well, that's not really available in this country. It's not a positive thing to take. Or a Chinese consumer, which we're starting to expand into, haven't really used essential oils in any meaningful way. So from there, you have to get into very visible physical demonstration. And they're living in a much more digital universe than a physical universe.
So anatomy can be a sort of trusted source and curate the best of the products that work for different audiences.
Yes, absolutely. I think we want to be this trusted dispenser of not just formulations, but advice, and to be able to support you as you move through life, whether it's a career or a challenge at work or home. We have lots of moms who have kids that struggle to sleep. And so there's a powerful tool where you can, in a meaningful, serious way, like transform, because there's a lot of skincare brands out there that often are trading under similar formulations. And so for the moment, we're doing something very different to other brands. I think the challenge ahead is building momentum and building reach.
Yeah.
And that's the things one has to do as a kind of entrepreneur and as a brand custodian.
Brendan, for anyone that doesn't know the Anatomy brand, it'd be great if you could give a sort of summary of what you might expect if you visited online or came to the store. You know, what's the sort of essence of Anatomy?
Yeah, the essence of anatomē is we're a modern apothecary, and an apothecary is someone that dispenses formulations, rare ingredients to support your well-being. So here we're supporting mind and body, emotional, physical well-being. And one of the big anchors for the brand is sleep. So we're dispensing these quite extraordinary essential oil sleep formulations that you use externally across the body that train the mind and the body to sleep better. And that's what we have our returning customers coming for. And then we build out this idea of a sleep practice with candles, bath oils, room diffusers that are all linked into sleep and recovering the body after exercise or after a long flight. And then we have formulations to anchor your physical well-being, whether it's gut health, immune health, and in fact, sleeping. We have a formulation for sleeping that those are ingestible health supplements. And then now layering on is this new collection of the parfums, well-being perfumes. And we want you to kind of move and glide through London and New York using our perfumes that have names like expression, focus, energy. And we're kind of really harnessing oil extracts, targeting them at specific challenges.
And who did you work with on the fragrances, Brendan?
Yeah, I've worked with them. Anastasia Brosier is a kind of well-known couture perfumer, and she does a few projects on a commercial basis. And I worked with her at Murdock creating 9 perfumes, colognes and one. And so we have a long-standing relationship, and I've done other projects with Anastasia. So I came to Anastasia and I said, look, I think this essential oil market is a little bit dated. Aromatherapy products that we all know in the market don't necessarily have a discerning top, middle, and base note. Lavender often is lavender, frankincense can be frankincense. But when you go into the world of perfumery, you're looking at where is that lavender growing, and what's the quality of the land, topography, climate that impacts scent. And so that was a real discipline that I worked with in Anastasia, creating each of the sleep oils and creating our new perfume collection.
I think it seems extremely well timed to me. With it seems like there's customers getting much more open to the idea of more sort of functional fragrances and fragrances that do other things. And I got the chance to pop into anatomē last week, and Brendan was very kind and let me sample a few of the fragrances, and they, I think sometimes those sort of aromatherapy type fragrances, as you mentioned, they don't always have the sort of the best reputation. And this is a premium product with a real sort of signature scent. And I particularly liked the Balance one. I think was the one that I really connected with. But they would stand alone anyway, wouldn't they, Brandon, in terms of they're a fragrance that works really well and that have some presence, but they've got this extra element, as you mentioned, that's about well-being and, making you feel good, which I guess, we know that fragrance has that ability to do anyway, but you've really sort of honed in on that, haven't you, with these?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a good example would be expression as a perfume. And it's when I was in Cap Ferret, and I know a lot of perfumers take you to places in the world, but when you connect on the pine trees into the ocean, you have this immediate sense of being relaxed. And the reason we enjoy being by the sea or a waterfall is the atoms that come off the water, and it helps us be at ease. A lot of people go there to recover to the coastline. And so we kind of brought that into a bottle where you have this sense of the ingredients, the salt from the sea, the sand, the cypress, but it's quite a specific formula that you're using through the day. And we're calling it an expression because it's all about extracts that help you breathe, helping you engage with your diaphragm. And those are the things we're trying to get people to connect with. The very name anatomē is about connecting with your physical being. And that's the exciting part with perfume. And for me, I realized when I'd be standing in the airport spraying a well-known signature vetiver range or a formulation that I would have bought many years ago, so many of these perfumes have become nearly 90 to 100% synthetic ingredients. You actually don't get any depth or balance in the scent. It's quite clawing on the body. And so I think it's really important that people understand that there is a natural and authentic way to engage with fragrance that maybe the fragrance market has drifted away from because it's become such a huge market. There's just no way you can make the abundance of perfume that maybe say key luxury brands are making in its pure natural form.
Yeah, they'd have to spend far more on the actual oils, wouldn't they, and natural ingredients, and yeah, some of them are sort of less willing to do so. And in terms of the podcast is broadly aimed at men, but are there certain products that are sort of hero products for men in the anatomy range, Brendan?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Like, we worked with, Anastasia has a very well-known tennis player, private client. So I was saying to her, what would he wear? And he's one of the most famous tennis players. But we created Energy, which has got fleurs orange, neroli. It has backed with a little bit of tobacco so that the citrus doesn't just disappear. And citrus scents are often about energizing and performance and focus. And one of the interesting things is whether it's a tennis player or a dancer or performer, they're often using scent to anchor their performance. Even Anastasia works with some singers, creating scent for them when they're on stage. So there's this interesting secret world we don't know about scent and performance. So we have another scent called Focus, which is quite masculine in its way, although everything we have is unisex. But Focus has got sandalwood, it has ginger. So it's about spices to awaken the brain when you're feeling tired or sluggish. So I think from the new collection, without doubt, men will find, in fact, all the scents are just totally accessible to both men and women. But those are maybe two examples that I think would be meaningful. And then outside of the range, we have, I was talking at the top of the call about our supplements. So we have one for focus, we have one for sleep. We have something for immune well-being for men. So there's a real core collection that men will connect with and do discover within the brand.
That's fantastic. Well, we're going to come back and talk much more about anatomy in a second. But as always on the podcast, I love to find out from my guests about their own morning and evening routines and perhaps products that they enjoy using and might care to recommend. So I'm sure you get the opportunity to try lots of different things, Brendan, and obviously through your career have worked with lots of different product makers and sort of found your own edit of things that work well for you. Have you found that you've got a kind of tight edit of products that you like now, or do you still like to trial different things? Where are you at with sort of morning and evening routines in terms of the sort of product lineup?
I think I've stripped it back completely.
Have you?
Yes. There's a kind of, in the beauty industry, a pushing of too many things. You might use something that dries out the skin and then you end up having to use something that highly moisturizes it. So I don't have any hair and I only use the Anatomē Illuminating Face Oil, and that's the only skin product I use. So I use it on my head, I use it on across my face. It has avocado, it's got sea grape, so it really illuminates skin quite quickly. It removes dark circles and it kind of reduces fine lines quite quickly. So it's quite a all-round foolproof product. And then in the shower, I use it's all about anatomy, I guess, but I use our shower gel. And I don't need to use a face wash separately because the shower gel is organic ingredients and it's quite nurturing ingredients and it's sulfate free. So when you remove sulfate and remove certain ingredients, it can then be suitable for using on the face. The issue you have sometimes with some shower gels is they'll put other extracts in it. Those are the two products I use every morning. And then I layer in with maybe a body oil or a moisturizer on the body once or twice a week. And the evening routine, I use sleep oil and I kind of use the same products in the evening. So I'm a bit boring, to be honest.
No, but if you found a routine that works, and that's key, isn't it? And in terms of fragrance, Brendan, are you sort of in the process of using the different anatomy fragrances from the new range, or do you have any others that you return to?
Yeah, I've been using Expression a lot, which I like because it's really light and subtle. And so when you're doing different things, it's easy. And we created these travel sizes that can go into your gym bag. Outside of that, I like a couple of Sierra Trudon's perfumes that I picked up in Paris. And I think even because of they're in these simple travel vials that we're bringing in as well. It just makes it easy. And that's pretty much it. And I have a couple of things from Santa Maria Novella I like to use.
Oh, yeah.
I like
lovely brand.
Yeah. Summer months. Yeah. And I like Aqua de Cuba. If it's super hot, it sweats on your skin. So I like that original core collection that Santa Maria Novella are very well known for.
And in terms of shaving, Brendan, what do you do? Do you wet shave, or do you just leave a bit of stubble?
I leave a little bit of stubble. I find with shaving, I was getting ingrown hairs. So a lot of the razors that you use now will push the hair back into the skin. So the myth around a clean shave is a myth. Most people will struggle with ingrown hairs. And so you should always be leaving a little bit of hair above the skin and not pushing to have this pure clean shave. But with the modern triple and quadruple blades that are on the market, I mean, if you have the patience for a single blade, you're not going to encounter that level of problem. So for me, I like having a little bit of stubble, and I use a very simple electric handheld clipper. And then I use our face oil to moisturize around the area having shaved. Funny, the other day, someone came in asking me did we have a beard oil, because I sold, he knew from Murdock. And I was like, well, look, this is not labeled a face beard oil product, but it will do the same thing. And I think he really wanted it to say beard oil on the package. And so I said, well, you need to go down the street.
You can write it on.
I always discover that when you're creating products and you don't put a name on it or a label and you give someone a bear bottle, they sometimes struggle. Well, what's it for?
Yeah.
And we're so used to seeing branded elements that tell you what it does.
I know, we want to be spoon-fed, don't we? I think
people are a bit adrift.
Yeah. And you've released a book, haven't you? The Modern Apothecary, with yourself and Gabriel Weil. Is that just a way of sort of going deeper and allowing people to understand the principles and the idea behind the brand?
Yeah, a publisher called Kyle Books approached us and said, would you like to write a book? And I was like, well, why not? Let's do that. But it's a useful exercise, solidify what the brand is, the story of the apothecary. We dig in a very light touch manner into the world of well-being, the well-being timeline, and it kind of reminding people that wellness is not a new thing, whether it's the Egyptians or the Greeks or the Romans. There was a lot of traditions that are still being used in today's society. And, the Middle Ages, people didn't sleep, in the way that we sleep today. Everyone around the world has a bed to sleep in. And hopefully not everyone, but that's a presumption. But I think this modern way of living is born out of other areas. And then I think it infuses the book some education around ingredients, some education around the pillars of well-being.
Yeah, you talk about the 5 pillars. It'd be great if you could explain the 5 well-being pillars.
Yeah, I think really what we did touch upon are the anchors of sleep.
Yeah.
And that's the core pillar for me. I think balance is really important in just terms of overall living our lives, that we often forget to find time for ourselves, whether it's inflamed anxiety that you might discover or pressures at home. So I think when we talk about balance, it's really focusing in on how to achieve balance within the home, how to benefit from different bathroom practices, getting outdoors and connecting with the world, because that takes us into the idea of movement. And for everyone, moving and exercising, whether it's monitoring your step count or more vigorous exercising, I think not enough people are really often day-to-day aware of that. But I think with the rise of digital apps, we're completely much more engaged with that. I think diet is really important, obviously. And I'm quite good about keeping a very fresh diet. I think in Britain, there's been an over-reliance on ready-made meals, high salt content. It's obviously a pandemic in America with the amount of in their own diet, leading to other challenges. So I think that's something we all need to be aware of. And then focus is maybe not an obvious pillar, but we're all seeking to do better in life, and we're living in a world where we're increasingly distracted. Sometimes we can't get through an hour without checking our phone and checking our email. And so this modern day approach, that being focused and finding that direction, helps us to perform better. It helps us to live better, to find, it leans back into those other 4 pillars. So for me, that's something we could talk a little bit more about in today. A lot of us don't know how to focus. You probably had the same experience with...
Yes, I think it's getting worse, isn't it? And I think I certainly feel guilty of that. Just, that idea of all the different tabs in your brain open and just, not being able to actually focus on for me, it's, sitting down and needing to write or to edit, I'm not as concentrating as I used to be, and I'm finding it more difficult. I think it's too many distractions, and it's a real problem, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, sometimes I look at a 7 or 8 hour working day. I think in this country, productivity is lower. We're working 8 to 9 hours, but we're actually underperforming in lots of different areas. And it's trying not to let work dominate every crevice of our life, because it becomes a distraction when you're not able to focus. So yeah, it's quite a specific.
I totally agree. And I found it really interesting in the book, with the name of the podcast being Man in the Mirror. There was a section that was talking about how the mirror was created by an apothecary, and you talk in the book about a mirror being a window to self-love, and being able to accept the flaws that we have and not obsessing. So it sort of leads me to my question about what you think about when you look in the mirror, and how you feel about yourself and self-image.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Gabriel really introduced this element into the book, because often being in the bathroom is the safe space and the space where you can close out the world. And I think, whether you're in a partnership or a couple or living alone, sometimes we don't really connect with our own bodies. And we can. Some people will be doing it through yoga and other things. But in the bathroom, you're naked, you're in front of the mirror, it's just you. I often forget to look at myself. I forget to say, I think sometimes I expect to see a 31-year-old self staring back in the mirror. So having that moment, maybe in the shower, slightly longer, and using, for example, we created a body oils to get people to stay longer in the shower and have that extra minute to decompress, rather than just functionally washing yourself, which is often what we're just doing. We're not necessarily standing and relaxing and sighing. And then taking that moment on skin rituals, cleansing, and looking at your face and just recognizing what's looking back at you is something that we were really trying to connect with beyond the skin regimes that we're talking about.
And personally, do you feel, obviously, you have this brand that's about health and happiness and trying to be about wellness. Do you feel in a good space and healthy, and are you happy with what looks back at you in the mirror?
I think I've always been quite comfortable with how I look. Even when I had Murdock in the early days, people were coming in they would reveal they'd had a hair transplant. And so I've never had that concern about losing hair. I mean, it'd be great to have a full head of hair, but it's not something that I've really, I know for some people it's debilitating. The aging process, I'm more aware of it now. I'm approaching 50, whether it wouldn't dominate me, but I'm not against the way that people maybe do small corrections, or, it's a bit like going to a dentist and you may adjust something on your face. That a droopy eyelids, for example, is an actual medical condition for a lot of people.
So would you consider it then? So some sort of, treatments and tweakments?
I haven't considered it, but I'm not against those small things,
And finally, Brendan, I think it's apt for a brand that's all about health and happiness to actually ask you, what are the things that make you happy and bring you joy, perhaps outside of the workplace and anatomē?
I think beyond having a lovely boyfriend and cooking and all of those great things, I think being in the outdoors. I live near Regent's Park, and I find it quite rejuvenating to run around the park in the morning and being in touch with nature. Outside of that, I do a lot of theatre and culture.
Is there a particular thing that you like to go and see? Are you a kind of opera guy or plays, or do you like to go and experience all of the culture in London?
I think I have a broad taste palette, anything from a musical through to opera. I do like to go to the Royal Opera House. And I think for anyone listening, remember, you can stand in the stalls for £20. And often that's way better than being up in the amphitheatre. That's if you don't want to stand.
I didn't know you could go so cheaply. That's great.
Yeah. And go stand in the circle and it's splendid, rather than having a sore head up in the attic. And alongside that, what I really enjoy is institutions or organizations, I should say, like the Almeida, the Donmar, the National Theatre, and all of those establishments. And there's many, many more on the fringes that are producing really interesting work. And then on a Sunday, it's really pleasant to go to the LS, the London Symphony Orchestra, the Barbican. It's one of the nicest halls in London. And again, you can hear some really interesting things on a Sunday night. And it's a really nice way to finish off the week, going to the Barbican, and it's such an iconic building.
And have you seen any plays recently that you've really enjoyed and could recommend?
Yeah, I have actually. I saw The Hills of California by Jez Buttersworth, and I thought it was one of...
Now, I want to see this. Was it good?
It's extraordinary, and it's just a magical, kind of really heart-wrenching, emotional play about motherhood, about family, about stage moms, but it's extraordinary. I thought it was really special. And I've told lots of friends they must go and see it. It was one of the best things I've seen in the last 5 years.
Is it really? Yeah, I want to go. It's set in Blackpool, is it?
It's set in Blackpool in a B&B and, this guest house, and they don't really have a view of the sea. And the mother is totally ambitious about them becoming singers like the Andrews sisters. And it just doesn't, people should go and see it. I don't need to tell anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's only on for a few more weeks and then it goes to Broadway in September.
That's right. Yeah, I must try and get there before it closes. Oh, Brendan, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to spend some time with you and to hear more about anatomy and to hear about the book. And I shall put links to all of those things and some of the products that you talked about in the show notes. And thank you again. Best of luck with the new fragrance launches. And I'll see you again very soon. Thanks for doing this.
Yes, and it was a pleasure to chat with you. So thank you very much for inviting me on to Man in the Mirror.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks, Brendan. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Thanks to Brendan. I took so much from that conversation. I hope you did too. A really interesting and insightful man. And particularly, I took a lot from the conversation around sleep. And if you did want to check out the book, it is called The Modern Apothecary, and it's written by Brendan Murdock and Gabriel Weil. Really interesting, and there's so much in there, and lots of advice for modern living, I suppose. If you want to find out more about anatomy, you can do there on Instagram at Anatomy London. And anatomy is spelled ANATOME, Anatomy London. On the web, they are anatomy.co. Nothing else, no UKs, no coms. It's anatomy, ANATOME.co. And you can find all the products online for anatomy there. If you want to find out more about Man in the Mirror, I'm on Instagram at Man in the Mirror Pod. I live on TikTok as You Smell Great, What Is It? It's at You Smell Great, What Is It on TikTok. At Man in the Mirror Pod on Instagram. I also have another Instagram called You Smell Great, What Is It? Which is why that name applies. It's kind of more of a fragrance account. But anyway, that's where you can find me. And I'll update those channels on what's coming up on the podcast, future guests, tease new things. And you can also find out more information about previous seasons and episodes you may have missed in the past. Thank you to Brendan for such a brilliant and insightful conversation. Thank you to you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with more Man in the Mirror next week. But until then, take care.